My name is Mara Ellington, 20 years old. The sky over Ohio was the color of unwashed metal when my flight landed the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Half-melted snow sulked along the runway. The wind was the kind that made expensive jackets feel like napkins. I hadn't been home since August. Between classes, a part-time job, another that paid cash, and the constant math of how many shifts equals how much tuition, I'd put Thanksgiving on the calendar like a soft landing. Grandpa Harold was waiting at arrivals with a cardboard sign written in blocky Sharpie, Mara, unpaid farmhand. I grinned before my brain had a chance to catch up. That was Grandpa, the quietest person in most rooms and somehow always the loudest truth. We didn't talk much on the drive. He pointed at a buck on the shoulder and said, "People used to remember snow has rules." I nodded, as if I'd been here through the storms to notice. We turned into my parents' driveway, and the first thing that hit me wasn't cold. It was nothing. No porch light left on. No cinnamon or turkey humidity fogging the windows. No TV yelling football into the street. The house looked like a rental between tenants. I rolled my suitcase inside and waited for the smell of home to arrive late. It didn't. Just emptiness, like someone had boxed up Thanksgiving and mailed it to a family with better manners. Grandpa set his keys in the ceramic bowl and sat at the kitchen table like we were right on schedule. I took out my phone to text my mother and saw a message timestamped 3 hours earlier. "Dad, we spent $7,000 on a family vacation. Have fun." Attached, a resort photo. Mom, Dad, my older sister Dana, her husband Trent, the girls, Savannah, 14, Zoe, 12, even the dog, matching Hawaiian shirts, sunglasses, cocktails held at the exact angle of smug. Caption, Maui 2025. I stared until the pixels hummed. At first I thought it was a joke with bad timing. Then I showed Grandpa. He studied the screen like it might confess, then put it down and said, in the same tone he reserves for storms rolling in, "Trust me, we'll show them where the crabs winter." The old family phrase slammed a memory door open. I was 8 the first time I heard it, when Dad borrowed quarters from Grandpa's ashtray. It didn't mean revenge, it meant consequence. I didn't ask for definitions, I nodded. "Coffee," Grandpa said, already up. He handed me a chipped mug and a yellow legal pad. Names, dates, accounts. Write what you know. What I know was $8,170. The number was a metronome in my head. I'd earned most of it over summer. 2 jobs. Cash tips I logged in a notes app, a shoebox under the bed while I tried to decide which online bank I trusted least. I left Grandpa writing and took the stairs 2 at a time. My room felt invaded in a way I couldn't articulate at first. The quilt was tucked too neat. The dust on my bookshelf had finger streaks. The shoebox under the bed was there, lighter than a joke. I opened it anyway. A receipt for a graduation gift, a couple of movie stubs, tissue paper, air. The number in my head didn't change. It just turned into heat behind my eyes. When I came back downstairs, I put the legal pad on the table. On it, $8,170. Saved June, August. Hidden room. Gone. Grandpa read it. He didn't touch my shoulder. He never has to. He nodded once, then picked up the landline like a man pulling a fire alarm. He installed himself. 3 calls. The first to Benny, who has a print shop in a garage and a reputation for making problems into postcards. The second to Arthur, retired attorney, poker night friend, known for writing letters that sound like court breathes through them. The third to Ed, who used to work for the sheriff's department and now fixes fences and people's memories of what rules are. He told each of them very little and somehow everything. "Tomorrow morning," he said into the phone. "Bring stamps." "Yes, certified." "No, we're not loud. Yet." He hung up and poured instant coffee into a second mug like a ceremony. I stood there in the kitchen I grew up in, trying to reconcile the photo on my phone with the empty oven. Maui with my money. It would have been a mean story even if the cash were theirs. But it wasn't. It was hollow bones full of air, and someone had cracked them open with a LOL have fun. Grandpa slid a pen toward me. "Where'd you hide it?" "Under the bed," I said. "Shoebox." "Cleaners," he said, the words small and precise like tweezers. "Your mother gets brave with other people's drawers when she's got an audience." I swallowed. "It's theft." He nodded again. "Now it's paper." "What does that mean?" "Law," he said, and stood up. "Law likes paper." He left me at the table with the legal pad while he disappeared into the attic and came back with a metal case the color of old rain. He set it on the table, clicked open the latches, and lifted out a typewriter that looked like it remembered a war. He threaded a ribbon with the tenderness he'd never show a person who'd lied to him. "You're not using a laptop?" I asked, because the absurdity needed a release valve. "Type scares cowards," he said. "Ink scares liars." He rolled paper in and began to type, not angry, not fast, just steady. My name, the amount, the months, the detail that the shoebox under the bed had been full on Sunday and emptied by Tuesday. The line, "I am documenting this for transparency and resolution with the kind of calm you can't fake." By morning, there were 3 copies of the letter, sealed and addressed. Dad's employer, Dad's accountant, who conveniently preps Uncle Mike's taxes, and my mother's favorite stage, the country club. Not accusations exactly, just the kind of facts that make people nervous about where their names appear next. We ate toast like a court date wasn't cooling on the counter. "Bank," Grandpa said after breakfast, already putting on his coat. "For what?" I asked. He tapped the legal pad. "We need a door to leave open. It's bait if we need it." At the bank, he opened an account in his name with me as co-signer and deposited a grand total of $100. The teller made a face like she'd been handed a recipe without ingredients. Grandpa thanked her anyway. "Now the stamps," he said. We drove to Benny's garage. The smell of ink and hot paper punched me with a memory of science fair posters and homecoming banners. Benny grinned when he saw Grandpa. "Harold, you owe me 20 for the last batch of mischief." "This one's on me," Grandpa said, passing him a list of addresses with my mother's social circle gleaming on it. Church friends, the Pilates group chat, the neighbor who believes gossip is philanthropy. "What are we printing?" Benny asked, already loading cardstock. "Save the date," Grandpa said. "Harold turned 75. "But you turned 75 in 14 months, Arambaya," Grandpa said. "I'm a planner." The postcards were crisp and cheerful, exactly the kind of thing that would make my mother hold them like proof of a life well curated. We left with a stack that smelled like a promise and a threat that might wear the same suit to a party. At dinner, Grandpa made something that tasted like the Depression, but with more onions. He poured 2 inches of cheap whiskey, slid 1 glass to me, and said, "Your father stole quarters out of my ashtray when he was 16. It starts small. No one says anything. The habit learns its lesson." "He took all of it," I said. It wasn't a complaint. It was a weather report. Grandpa looked at me for a long beat and then past me, through me, into a time I haven't been alive long enough to understand. "I didn't raise him to be that kind of man," he said, "but if he wants to act like one, we'll treat him like one." He went to bed early. I sat in the kitchen with the typewriter and the letters and the legal pad and the ghost of a turkey that never roasted. I opened Facebook, posted the Maui photo with a caption that said, simply, "Glad they're enjoying my tuition money." Shares and comments arrived like hail. Mom texted, "Delete it." Dad emailed, clarifying our misunderstanding. Dana sent a voicemail that started with, "You don't understand how hard they work," and ended with, "God, you're such a martyr." I didn't answer. The house was very quiet and very mine for the night. At 8:13 p.m., the phone on the wall rang. Grandpa answered like he always does, as if he's picking up a weather radio, not a rope tossed from a ship he plans to let sink. He said, "Uh-huh," 5 times, "I see," twice, and then, after a pause long enough for me to count to 12, "You will return every dollar or I press send." He hung up and set the receiver in its cradle like a gavel. "What's send?" I asked. He pointed at a folder labeled in his blocky hand, IRS contact sheet. He still hadn't told them he knew how they got the money out of my room. That was the part I would learn in the morning, the part where my mother texted her sister about doing a deep clean and accidentally sent herself to the curb with the recyclables. For now, the typewriter sat on the table, blackout ribbon glistening like a fresh bruise. The letters waited in a neat row, patient as consequences. Upstairs, in the bedroom where my shoebox used to be heavy, I slept with the legal pad on my nightstand and a number in my head that finally, mercifully, turned into a plan. At sunrise, the house sounded like a museum exhibit, quiet, purposeful. Grandpa had already brewed coffee and lined 3 envelopes on the table like instruments. The typewriter sat off to the side, ribbon still gleaming. He slid the letters into a large manila mailer and tapped it twice. "Certified," he said. "No one pretends they didn't see what ink sends." We drove into town with the heater on high and the windows fogging just enough to feel like we were traveling through a secret. At the post office, he insisted I be the one to hand the envelopes over and sign the green cards. One to Dad's employer, one to Dad's accountant, the same man who manages Uncle Mike's taxes, and one to the country club desk. Attention, manager. Not an accusation in any of them, just the steady weight of facts that make people feel watched. Back home, he set a small stack of Benny's postcards on the counter. I thumbed through them. Save the date. Harold's 75th birthday. Potluck. The cardstock was cheerful in a way that felt almost cruel. You really mailed these? I asked. Oh, yes, he said. People love two things, cake and news they weren't supposed to know yet. We addressed them to every person my mother hoarded for status the way other people collect spoons. Church friends, the Pilates circle, the neighbor who calls gossip prayer. Grandpa stamped them with the glee of a man who has outlived the need to be liked. By noon, the certified receipts updated online. Accepted, the tracking pages read, like a verdict. I waited for the first siren. It didn't come. Instead, there was a trickle of pings, texts from numbers that lived in Mom's group chats. Saw the cutest save the date. You must be so excited for Harold's party. Do you need me to bring deviled eggs? Tell Harold we love him. Is Mara coming home for it? I stared at the messages and felt something unfamiliar. Control without noise. Mid-afternoon, Dad tried narrative management. His email subject line read, clarification. The corporate word people use when they're about to make you doubt your memory. We didn't realize you were coming home, he wrote. The cash in your room looked like leftover high school savings. We panicked about some bills. The Maui trip had been planned long ago. This is all a misunderstanding. Let's keep this private for the family's sake. Grandpa printed the email, folded it in half with a precision that felt like insult, and tucked it into a red folder. He wrote idiots on the tab with the same steady block letters he'd used on the IRS sheet. Not yet, he said, as if reading a question I hadn't asked. Mom called 3 times, then switched to texts. Delete your post, sweetie. You're embarrassing yourself. You don't understand how hard your father works. Dana sent a voice memo so long the app broke it into 2 parts. In the first, she said, I know you think you're making a point. And in the second, God, you love playing the martyr. I left both on read and felt their weight evaporate into the room like steam. At 4:17 p.m., Grandpa answered a call on the landline. He listened for a long time with his blank listening face on, the one that makes people confess more than they meant to. Uh-huh, he said 5 times. I see. Then, after a pause that could have balanced a coin on its edge, return every dollar or I press send. He set the receiver down like a gavel and walked into the living room to sit in his recliner, the typewriter still visible over his shoulder like a witness. Do we press? I asked. We wait, he said. Paper cuts bleed slower than they think. Dinner was eggs in a pan too small for both of us at once, toast with a corner burned off, and the quiet that comes when you've already decided not to apologize. We watched a game show from a decade ago and let other people's answers fill our house for a while. That night, the social weather turned. The Maui Post gathered shares like hailstones. Older cousins I barely speak to popped up in my DMs with wide-eyed emojis and wait. What happened? An aunt texted, "Are you safe?" which was both kind and accidentally hilarious. My favorite came from a church friend of Mom's who has never liked me. This feels like family matters shouldn't be on the internet. I typed and deleted 3 responses before choosing none. Silence was doing the talking just fine. Wednesday morning, Grandpa was already at the table with a pen and a small stack of forms I didn't recognize. County clerk, he said, in case we need a smaller hammer before the big one. He didn't fill them out, just slid them into a manila folder labeled if. On my phone, Dad switched tactics again. He CC'd Mom this time and used phrases like heat of the moment and miscommunication. And we're hurt, you'd go public. He ended with, let's act like a family. It amazed me how that word could be both shield and weapon, depending on how you held it. Grandpa took the printed email, smoothed it flat, and put it under the idiots tab. You're keeping their words like evidence, I said. I'm keeping their words because they finally wrote them down, he said. By late morning, a different kind of message arrived, one that changed the temperature of the room. My phone buzzed with a screenshot from my Aunt Lila, the only relative who loves truth more than baked ziti. It was Mom's text to her. Deep cleaned Mara's room before Thanksgiving, found a bunch of cash. Kids are so careless. House needed it. Put her trophies on Marketplace while I was at it. Teen stuff takes up space, lol. Aunt Lila's caption was simple. WTF is wrong with them? My hands shook before my mouth did. I passed the phone to Grandpa. He read the text twice, then walked to the pantry, reached to the top shelf, and pulled down a thin, dust-covered cigar box. Inside was a small ledger that smelled like old barns and arithmetic. He licked a finger, opened to a blank page, and wrote across the top, "People who no longer exist." Under it, he printed 3 names in careful order: Thomas Ellington, my father; Linda Ellington, my mother; and after a long, pained breath, Dana Caldwell, my sister. He closed the box without flourish and set it gently back on the shelf. "What now?" I asked, voice small even to my own ears. "Now we get Arthur out of his garage," he said. He dialed, and I heard the soft laugh on the other end before I recognized the voice. Arthur speaks like a man who still ironed his shirts during quarantine. He asked 3 questions, said twice, and told us to come by in an hour. When we arrived, Arthur had already set up his converted basement desk like a courtroom play, lamp angled just so, letterhead stacked, fountain pen filled. Grandpa laid out the facts without adjectives. Arthur wrote as if the words paid rent. Formal demand for return of funds. That was the title. It listed the amount, the dates, the method of theft, Mom's own text was Exhibit A, and the time limit, 3 business days. It mentioned politely the words fraud, theft, and trespass. It CC'd, not so politely, Ed at the sheriff's department for awareness. He printed 2 copies and slid them across the desk like a dealer. "Hand one to your mail carrier with a certified slip," he said. "Drop one at their place. Put it under a porch camera they can't erase." Back in the truck, Grandpa rested his hands on the steering wheel, but didn't start the engine. "Do you feel bad?" I asked. "I feel old," he said. Then he looked at me and softened in the way only people who remember you as a toddler can. "And I feel awake." That afternoon, I posted nothing. I didn't need to. The postcards were already in the mail. The certified letters were already traveling like small, silent process servers with stamps for faces. The screenshot was saved in 3 places, and Arthur's letter felt heavy in the backpack I'd used to carry textbooks. At 6:12 p.m., Mom sent a long apology that wasn't an apology. We were going to replace it. You wouldn't even have noticed if the timing had been better. She ended with the line "Liar's love." This has gone too far. I printed it and tucked it behind idiots, and for the first time since Tuesday, I laughed. At 9:03 p.m., Dad called Grandpa again. The conversation was shorter. Grandpa's half of it was 4 words. Monday, cash, every dollar. He hung up and looked at me. "You can still call it off," he said. "I won't do this behind your back." "I don't want you behind my back," I said. "I want you next to me." He nodded, like I'd passed a test he forgot to warn me about. He went to bed. I stayed up and watched the microwave clock change minutes without my help. At 11:40, Dana texted one last time. "You've humiliated Mom. Is that what you wanted? You'll regret this when you need us one day." I typed, "I needed you Tuesday. You were in Maui." Then I deleted it. Better to let her argue with a silence that agreed with itself. The house settled. The envelope slept. The typewriter's metal cooled to the room temperature. I turned off the kitchen light and climbed the stairs. In the morning, the plan would stop being a plan. Paper would become action, and the people who had always trusted noise to win were about to learn what ink could do. Monday came gray and heavy, the kind of morning that feels like it's waiting for something to break. Grandpa was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his 2nd cup of coffee and the red folder open beside him. The demand letter sat on top like a loaded weapon neither of us wanted to touch first. "They'll call," he said, "but don't pick up. Let them talk to themselves for a while." He wasn't wrong. By 10:20 a.m., my phone was vibrating nonstop. Mom, Dad, even Dana, all calling one after another. I let it ring until the sound blended into the ticking of the wall clock. At 10:34, a text came through. "Dad, we can have most of the money by tomorrow. Please don't make this worse." Me, all of it, by noon. He didn't reply. By noon, the house was quiet except for the sound of Grandpa's pen scratching across the envelope. He'd written IRS in clean, deliberate letters. Underneath, a 2nd envelope waited, labeled Sheriff. At 11:50, my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. It was my mother. Mara, honey, she began, voice trembling like paper in the wind. Please, we didn't mean for any of this to happen. Your father, he thought you weren't coming home for the holiday. I texted you 2 weeks ago, I said flatly. You asked if I wanted pumpkin or pecan pie. Silence, then some eyes. Then it's him, we made a mistake. You stole from me, I corrected. She started crying, loud and sudden. We were going to pay it back. Maui was supposed to be a vacation you bought with my savings. It wasn't just yours, she said sharply, dropping the fragile tone. Your family shares. I looked at Grandpa. He didn't even glance up from his coffee. Family asks, I said. Family doesn't rob a bedroom and call it teamwork. Mara. You have 10 minutes, I said, and hung up. At exactly noon, Grandpa stood, cracked his knuckles, and reached for the envelopes. You ready? I nodded, throat tight but steady. He picked up the one marked IRS. This is for taking, he said. Then he tapped the one underneath. This one's for lying. Both, I asked. One for now, he said. The other's insurance. He slid the IRS letter into a certified mail sleeve, signed the green receipt card, and handed it to me. You get to do the honors. At 12:04 p.m., the letter officially left our hands. Done, I said. Grandpa exhaled through his nose, slow, satisfied. Good. Now we let the truth do the walking. 2 hours later, the black SUV pulled into the driveway. I saw their reflections before I saw their faces. Dad's jaw tight, Mom's eyes red. Both of them standing at the door like teenagers caught sneaking in after curfew. When I opened it, they didn't cross the threshold. Mara, please, Mom said. Don't do this to us. To you? I repeated. We're sorry, Dad said quickly. We panicked. We didn't think you'd notice. You didn't think I'd notice $8,000 missing? He looked at the ground. We'll pay it back. You already were supposed to, I said. Behind me, Grandpa's chair creaked. He didn't stand. He didn't even turn. He just said, cash today. Dad glanced at him nervously. We can get you $5,000 right now, he said. The rest by Thursday. Grandpa finally turned his head. Then Thursday, you'll see which envelope goes next. Mom's lip trembled. You can't threaten your own son like this. I'm not threatening, Grandpa said calmly. I'm keeping records. Dad ran a hand through his hair, looked like he wanted to yell, but all that came out was, please, just give us a couple of days. Grandpa nodded once. You have until Monday, he said, even though it was already Monday. That was his kind of mercy, one last chance you'd regret wasting. They left without another word. Tuesday morning, I woke to the sound of Grandpa shuffling through the kitchen. The envelopes were still on the counter, untouched. He'd made pancakes, like it was any other day. You think they'll bring the money? I asked. He shrugged. I think they'll test the clock first. He was right again. At 11:50, my phone rang. Dad's number. I put it on speaker. We don't have it all, he said quickly. We've got about $3,000. The rest is tied up. Hotel charges, travel stuff. Your mom had an accident with a scooter. I blinked. A scooter accident? She's fine, he said, as if that helped. But the medical fees... You stole from me, I interrupted. And now you're using my money to pay for a scooter accident? Dad didn't answer. Did you take it from my room? I asked. Silence. Then finally, yes. I looked at Grandpa. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. I hung up, picked up both envelopes, and placed them on the table in front of him. Okay, I said. Send the first one. He didn't ask if I was sure. At 12:04, the certified IRS envelope disappeared into the postbox like a small, quiet bomb. I texted my father one word. Sent. 2 hours later, the SUV returned. Mom was already crying before the door opened. Dad's face looked hollow, like he hadn't slept since the plane ride home. They didn't ask to come in this time. They just stood on the porch, begging. We'll get the rest, Mom said, tears streaking through her makeup. Please, Harold, cancel the letter. It was a mistake. We'll fix it. Grandpa didn't look at them. Cash, he said again. All of it. Today. We can't, Dad said. The banks. No arguments, Grandpa cut him off. Just today. They left again, quieter than before. At 6:43 p.m., the SUV pulled back into the driveway. Dad handed me an envelope stuffed with $5,000 in cash. The rest by Thursday, he said. I took it, counted it, closed the door. Grandpa took the envelope, removed $500, handed it back to me. For your trouble, he said, lighting a cigar on the porch. We'll hold the second envelope for now. He didn't have to explain which one he meant. The one marked sheriff waited like a loaded word we might never need to say. Thursday came quiet and gray. The air smelled like snow that hadn't decided to fall yet. Grandpa made pancakes again, this time with chocolate chips. At exactly 10:27 a.m., a text came through. Dad, we have the rest. Please let us in. Grandpa didn't even look up from his crossword puzzle. Let them, he said. They stood on the porch holding a plain white envelope, faces pale, shoulders slumped. Mom didn't speak. Dad just handed it over like it weighed more than it did. Inside, $3,170 in cash. To the dollar, no note, no apology. I laid it beside the first envelope and looked at Grandpa. He nodded once. Now they'll wait. What does that mean? I asked. You'll find out Sunday. They left, this time without looking back. That night, Grandpa called his financial advisor. I only caught fragments of the conversation, words like beneficiary, transfer, and sole owner. When he hung up, he slid a folder across the table. Inside, a notarized document with my name on it. Beneficiary, all holdings. Grandpa, I whispered, you don't have to. It's not about need, he said. It's about making sure the right people hold the keys when the locks change. He closed the folder, leaned back, and looked at me with something between pride and sadness. They thought they could take from you and walk away laughing, he said. They forgot who raised them. They forgot I keep receipts. And as the house fell into the kind of silence that follows long wars and small victories, I realized he was right. Some people mistake quiet for forgiveness. But in our family, quiet meant the storm had only just begun to settle its score. Sunday arrived cold and deceptively bright, the kind of morning that looks peaceful until you realize it's holding its breath. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Grandpa whistling softly in the kitchen. He was wearing his good jacket, the brown one with the elbow patches, the one he usually saves for church or funerals. The table was already set, 2 mugs, a stack of folded papers, and a half-smoked cigar resting in the ashtray. Big day, he said, glancing up. I blinked, still half asleep. What day? He smiled. My birthday. Didn't you get the save the date? It hit me all at once. The postcards Benny had printed, the ones we'd mailed to everyone my mother used to show off to. You actually mailed them? Oh, yes. He buttoned his jacket. You think I'd waste good cardstock? I almost laughed, but then I saw the look in his eyes, that quiet kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you've built a trap so elegant it only needs gravity to work. The community center parking lot was already full when we pulled in. Neighbors, old poker buddies, church members, even the country club ladies, all carrying covered dishes and gossip. The air smelled like casseroles and curiosity. And right in the middle of it all, my parents' SUV. They were there. Of course they were. Mom stood near the punch bowl, handing out cookies like she'd planned the whole event herself. Dad laughed too loudly, shaking hands, pretending this was normal. Even Dana had shown up, face pale and tight, trying to act casual while glancing at every camera in the room. I felt a flicker of anger, but it burned out before it could grow, because they weren't in control anymore. They were guests, not hosts, in a room Grandpa built. At exactly noon, Grandpa took the small stage near the front of the room. He tapped the microphone twice, waited for the chatter to die down, then smiled. Thank you all for coming, he began. When you get old, people start showing up to make sure you're still breathing. I appreciate the concern. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Mom forced a smile. Grandpa continued, voice steady, warm, but sharp enough to draw blood if you listened closely. Getting older makes you think about legacy, about what we leave behind. Some people leave money, some leave memories. I decided to leave clarity. He paused, letting the words settle. I've updated my estate plans, effective immediately. Everything I've worked for, saved for, and cared for is going to the one person who didn't steal from me or lie to my face. You could have heard a pin drop. Dad froze mid-sip of lemonade. Mom's smile cracked like porcelain. Then Grandpa looked straight at me. Mara, he said, come up here. The room turned. I felt heat crawl up my neck, every eye following me as I walked to the stage. Grandpa handed me the microphone like it was a medal. I didn't have a speech prepared, not for this, not for anything, but something in me decided that silence wasn't enough this time. So I said simply, thank you. That was it. No gloating, no lecture, just 2 words. And somehow it was enough. The rest of the afternoon was surreal. People clapped politely, whispered to each other, exchanged glances they'd pretend not to have later. My parents left early. No hugs, no goodbyes, just the sound of the SUV doors slamming shut. When the crowd thinned, Grandpa and I stayed behind to help the staff clean up. He hummed as he wiped down tables, moving slower than usual but lighter somehow. Revenge isn't loud, he said, half to himself. It's just lasting. We drove home in near silence, except for the faint sound of a country song leaking from the car radio. When we pulled into the driveway, Grandpa didn't turn off the engine right away. "They'll come by again," he said finally. "People always do when they realize the door's locked." He turned to me. "When they do, you don't owe them forgiveness. You owe yourself peace." He wasn't kidding. The next morning, I woke to the sound of him moving around outside. Through the window, I saw him on a ladder, unscrewing the security camera my dad had installed last year, the one that synced it to their phones. He carried it down, wiped it clean, and dropped it in the trash. Then he went around the house changing locks, front door, garage, even the basement one nobody used. When I asked why, he just said they lost access. After lunch, he pulled out a yellow legal pad and started making calls. Customer service reps, bank tellers, utility companies. Each call ended with the same phrase, clear and final. "Yes, I'm sure. Remove it." By the end of the day, every joint account, every automatic payment, every subscription with their names on it was gone. Even the family Chichway membership. It was the quietest kind of closure. No shouting, no confrontation, just paperwork. That night, Grandpa opened the hall closet and pulled out a small fireproof box. Inside was his old will, thick, yellowed paper, sealed in an envelope with his careful handwriting. He handed it to me without a word. "Read it," he said. I skimmed through. It was dated nearly 20 years ago. Every asset, every savings account, every property, all split between my parents and Dana. My name appeared only once, attached to the words "College Fund already disbursed." Without hesitation, he tossed it into the fireplace and struck a match. "You don't reward rats with cheese," he muttered as the flames took it. We sat there for a while, watching the paper curl and blacken until it collapsed into ash. For the first time in a long time, the house felt clean. 2 days later, a card arrived in the mail, store-bought, shiny, red and green. On the front, it said, "We miss you. Come home for Christmas. Let's start over." Inside was a photo. The family tree lit up in the background, my mom holding a tray of cookies, Dad smiling too wide, Dana standing behind them, pretending she hadn't spent the last month pretending I didn't exist. Even the dog wore reindeer antlers. Grandpa took one look at it and handed it back to me. "Desperate people decorate early," he said. I didn't reply to the card. But that night, I took a picture of the fireplace. No stockings, no ornaments, just the clean brick and the low burn of a fire that didn't need an audience. I posted it with the caption, "You can't decorate over betrayal." It got shared more than the Maui post ever did. By the weekend, half the family was calling Grandpa for context. He didn't pick up. And by Sunday evening, when the first snow started to fall, we both knew. The war was over. They'd lost. And not because we shouted louder, but because, for the first time in their lives, someone called their bluff and didn't flinch. The next morning, Grandpa called his lawyer and the county auditor. He wanted to transfer the property title. 2 days later, I signed the paperwork. The house, the one I grew up in, the one that held every argument and holiday and memory worth keeping, was now mine. When we got home, Grandpa handed me a folder. On the front, in his handwriting, was a note. "Trust is a stronger legacy than money." He smiled, small and proud. "Now you know where the crabs winter." I didn't answer. I just nodded, because I finally did. And it wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Winter came early that year. We didn't put up a tree. We didn't exchange gifts. We just roasted chicken and watched old movies. Outside, snow fell heavy against the windows, muffling the world into something peaceful. Grandpa sat by the window, watching the street, like he was keeping score of the quiet. "They'll spin their stories," he said softly, "but stories don't change who holds the deed." I looked around at the house, our house now, and felt a calm so sharp it almost hurt. My family had spent years mistaking kindness for weakness. They thought they could erase me with a vacation. Instead, they erased themselves from the will, from the house, from history. And as the snow kept falling, I realized Grandpa was right. Revenge isn't loud. It's just lasting.